Welcome to the Soft Rebellion podcast, a homecoming to the creative power of your female body. Our world uproots us from the gifts of the feminine, the intuitive, the instinctual, the cyclical, the soft. What's the result? Patriarchal cultures of perfectionism, shame, and disconnect that leave us constantly running, never arriving. Imagine a world of women softly rebelling, claiming our cyclicity, our weirdness and our rest as we courageously cultivate a deep and delicious relationship to our female bodies. My name is Florina. I'm an osteopath, dancer, writer and coach. I've been on my own journey sparked by an eating disorder to come home to the wild, poetic anatomy of my female body and awaken my creative power. And I invite you to join me and my guests, trailblazing teachers, healers and creatives, as we each reclaim our own soft rebellion. Welcome back on the podcast, and thank you so much for being with me and us today. What does magic and witchcraft mean to you? And how much of it do you allow there to be in your life? The witch, an ancient archetype, is there in all of us, waiting to be awakened and its powers to be used wisely. The witch is the one who gets things done magically, meaning in flow, and whilst she is harvesting the ocean of possibilities. And so did my today's guest, Sarah Robinson, get a lot of things done, being the author of a whole world of magical books. And together we explored why it is so powerful to invite fairy tale stories and the old ancient myth into our lives, as they help us to remember our true power and call out of us voices, ideas, visions, and dreams which otherwise would stay hidden. I'm so happy that you're here, and yeah, it was a magical and such a joyful conversation, and I hope you get lots out of it. Let me just tell you a little bit more about Sarah. Sarah Robinson is a yoga teacher and author based in Bath in the UK. Her background is in science. She holds a master's degree in psychology and neuroscience and has studied at Bath, Exeter and Harvard University. She loves weaving her love of all things mythic, magic and goddess. And she is passionate about creating work that inspires and transforms. Through yoga, meditation and ritual, she aims to help everyone connect with their own unique magic and inner power. And on that breath, let's dive in and enjoy. Welcome on the podcast, Sarah.
Thank you so much for inviting me. It's an honor and a joy, and I'm looking forward to a fun journey together.
Yes, a fun and magical, inspiring conversation. And we had this little chat before we hit that record button. And yeah, there are so many things we could talk about, right? And which I'd love to talk about. And who knows, maybe we'll have to make a part 1 and a part 2. That sometimes
I am fine with that.
That might be wiser, but we'll see where we get to. And yeah, yesterday I thought I'll start with that one statement, and now I'm thinking, no, actually, Sarah, let us start. Yes, something which so strikes me and I find just magical to read in itself. When I read about your background, you did a master's in psychology, you studied neuroscience in Bath, Exeter and Harvard, I think as well. And today, if one goes onto your Instagram profile, for example, the first thing is author of magical books, which I love because your books are magical. And I'm very curious, and I'm sure that many listeners are too, if you wouldn't mind to take us a few years back, or how did this initial background, psychology, neuroscience, kind of lead you into this into the landscape.
How did this happen? How did this happen? Oh yeah, it's I mentioned before we started, it's a bit of a rambling route, which is very me, and I suppose it was exactly what it should, or how it unfolded exactly as it should have, I suppose. But if I go right back, about age 7, I was taken to my first yoga class by my mum. So I started yoga. I went to a collection of kind of pagan kids clubs, I suppose you could call them, a lot of folk festivals. I grew up largely in the West Country, which is a very kind of folksy, mythical area of Britain. And so that was my upbringing.
Mm-hmm.
and then for younger listeners, I went to university at a time where it didn't really cost anything to go to university. So I know I wanted to go and I wanted to learn and kind of strike out on my own. I didn't really know what it was that I should be doing or I should be studying. But psychology is fascinating, and it's kind of sister sciences of neuroscience. And I think I was just interested in people. I was interested in people's stories, the way people lived, and the stories we tell ourselves, I suppose. So in a very roundabout sort of way, you could tie it into things I would do in the future. And I graduated, I got my master's, and I worked at various universities, but I kind of promptly found out that working in universities or 9-to-5 jobs in offices was just not my thing. It didn't feel very magical to me. So I trained to be a yoga teacher because I'd been doing yoga for decades at that point. So I thought, right, I'll be a yoga teacher. And then somewhere along the line, I read a very inspirational book by Lucy H. Pierce from Witchcraft Publishing.
We know her.
And and I had just a kind of a scrap of an idea of a book, and which was a sort of a bringing together of my journey. So a bit of magic, a bit of yoga, a bit of kind of West Country myth and folklore. And it was kind of my very specific potion, very specific brew of things that brought me joy. And lucky for me, she saw those little scraps and kind of saw what it was I was trying to do. And those little scraps would become Yoga for Witches, which came out about 5 years ago now. So that launched me into the realm of writing books, and it certainly kindled embers, because as soon as I wrote that first one, now I couldn't stop. I had an idea after an idea after an idea, and I was like, Lucy, I've got an idea for like 20 other books now. And just it sparked from there. So now I'm very honoured to write books full time for Womancraft Publishing. I also teach a little bit of yoga on the side, and so that is a very whistle-stop tour from age about 7 to now.
Wow. You know what? It's so interesting. The first thing, there are a couple of things which really strike me or touch me hearing that. One is how it feels on your way. You had a couple of so clear, just deep inner knowings. That's where I have to move on. That's what I have to do without too much. Just there is a kind of a very clear, I want to say, a very clear light going through your path. Do I feel that correctly?
Yes, and I think that was good, because there were times when I was doing something like I was a receptionist for a while, and I hated it, and I was terrible at it because I just didn't care. I couldn't, it wasn't sparking joy, and I couldn't kind of care about it as a job. So even though that was the wrong kind of little offshoot of path, it was very clear to me that this is definitely not what I want to do with my life. So even when I went the kind of wrong way, I was like, this is definitely not right. So I kind of, at least I kind of managed to pull myself back onto a path, even though I wasn't quite sure where I was headed at some points. It was clear when something was right for me, or the right step on a path, or when something definitely was not the right thing.
Yes.
So that's kind of reassuring. And, so it took me up to the age of, 34, 35 to get to this kind of book writing point. But now I'm here, it's like, this was where I was supposed to be right now. So
yeah, and trusting those moments really led you into your very unique flow. And once that's what I feel, once we are in that flow, then flow is flowing, water is flowing.
Yes. Absolutely, and the ideas are flowing, and it just feels great, and it's like, oh, this is what it was all about. This was the point to get to, at least, for now. So,
and the other two things really struck me, and I feel, let's demystify the word magic here, because you said you worked at universities and and it didn't feel magic to you, and you moved on, and I know that you mean that fully, very authentic, pure and raw, and not in a romantic or poetic or yes, things are meant to feel magic to us. That's why your work speaks so much for me as well. And I can just hear some people say, oh, it didn't feel magic. Yes, it didn't feel magic, and that made Sarah move on. But would you mind dive a little bit more in there? What was it? What that,
I know what you mean, and I think, and you may well call it flow, or
yes, what does magic mean to you? That's my question, maybe.
Yes, there are probably 100 words you could use. For me, I always like the idea of within magic is one of my favorite words, which is possibility. I love the word possibility.
Yes.
And the possibility that things can be done that bring me joy, that I can reconnect things that become broken, or find new pathways. So for me, it's all about possibility, and kind of finding those sparks. And also that idea of flow, of feeling really immersed and really caring about what I do, and feeling passionate about it, and kind of doing it to the best of my ability. So that was the kind of the magic for me in that moment. Magic as a larger concept is obviously something that is just, it's got glittering, blurring edges. Like you cannot hold on to an idea of magic too tightly, because it's going to be something different for everybody, and you might call it something different, it might feel different. But I think when you're doing something or walking in a direction, something that is right for you, you know what that feeling is. Like what you call it is almost irrelevant, but to feel, this is it, this is right, this feels good, that's the important thing, I think. And then the word we want to attach to it is kind of almost it doesn't really matter. You can call it what you like.
But it's important possibility that is really, really potent, right? Because it immediately brings that question, is it work? Is it where we live, or whatever environment is? Is there, do I feel there is possibility for me to bring something, to change, to be creative? That's what I hear now. And I think, oh, thank you for that question. Yeah, let us ask, does that what I'm doing bring the magic in terms of, is there space? Really, magic is space, Sarah, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Space to unfold.
And when I've worked in places before, sometimes you get a sense, some people feel that there isn't any space, that they're stuck, that they're trapped, and it is, it breaks your heart, because it's, people can get trapped in corners, and I'm sure I've been there too, where you feel like there's nowhere to go, there's no sunshine to walk into it, you're just stuck in a job that doesn't spark joy, but you feel that there's no possibility of moving away from it. So that's when things can feel very not so good. So
go
on.
I just want to
we've got so many ideas. But opening ourselves up to the possibility that we can make choices, not always easy ones, but to find the right part. It can be worth the struggle, and it could be worth the stress of finding that possibility and walking out into that new path, or into the light.
I was just about to ask today, in moments when you, I'm sure you still, of course, we all have these moments exactly where we feel stuck and we can't see the possibility or the space, or especially that feeling of just stuck. How do you, I'm not even sure if overcome is the right word, but how do you move through these stuck moments? Do you have something to share?
Well, so two come to mind. One is something that Lucy does, which I'm sure she's mentioned on podcasts before, but she does what she calls creative bathing, which I love, and she just kind of sits herself down or goes out to a place that is just surrounded by beautiful artworks and amazing creative things. So it might be a gorgeous book, it might be to go to an art gallery, it might be to go out into a space where there is great beauty. So the idea of just kind of, it doesn't always have to be you putting it out there. Sometimes you just need to kind of absorb it and, you know, just kind of bask in it. So I thought, I remember when she first told me about that, I thought, gosh, that's a fantastic idea. So the idea of just letting yourself be in a space, and I suppose that leads on to what I've been doing recently, which is getting out into the landscape and seeking magic, or whatever you want to call it, seeking magic and enchantment in the landscape. Here in Britain, we have a land that is absolutely full of myth and folklore and magic and amazing pagan practices, and just to get out there and walk the land and find these stories has been very inspirational to me, and it's part of a new book I'm working on. It's just been wonderful to, up to this point, I've been kind of sat at my desk writing my books, if you know what I mean, and now I'm kind of getting out there into the world, and it feels like the right time to do that, to kind of tumble out into the green spaces and run free for a bit.
I love that. And that is wonderful. That exactly, maybe sometimes when you feel stuck, the first thing is actually to not to kind of go more into that density, but being with the density, and yes, seeing, I mean, you go into the nature, nature is full of possibilities, full of space. So immediately,
instead of the kind of drawing in, the kind of coming out, expanding, and it might be into nature, it might be doing some yoga, it might be some stretching, some breath work, like whatever it is for you. Sometimes expanding out is the way you can kind of reach out to kind of remind yourself, you know, you can expand outwards, you can kind of reach out from where you are right now, and there's something beyond that.
And receiving, right? And that brings us to the I'm not thinking of the magic feminine, right? These true feminine qualities, which actually are to receive, to sense, to that's what we did from the very start. I think back to the egg and the zygote,
and to hold these things and let them be, and kind of let them percolate and kind of see what they mean to you and how they can inspire you. And again, different for everybody. But,
creative bathing. I'm going to talk with Lucy on the 8th of July, so we can continue the conversation.
Yes.
And the third thing, which I thought, wow, that's cool, Sarah, from when the story you shared in the beginning was how you felt something that's, I can't keep flowing at university, you did the yoga teacher training, and you just had this idea for a book, and you just brought it into the world. You know, it's not the most common story you hear. You more hear people do their things for decades of years and then they write the book. And you had that idea, and I strongly believe if an idea finds us and it makes us feel alive, it's our bloody responsibility to do it.
Yes, I so agree. It's there's a book by the woman that wrote Eat, Pray, Love. I can't remember her name now.
Liz Gilbert.
Yes. So she wrote a book called Big Magic, which is a wonderful book about the creative process. And she very much says the same. It's like if an idea comes to you, then it's like, it's kind of your responsibility to kind of, that idea has come to you for a reason. So it's your responsibility to try and get it out into the world. And if you don't, it will go off and someone else will do it.
I have to read that
so
book.
It's kind of, it's fantastic. It's wonderful for sort of, it's about like the creative process and stuff. And but yes, it's that idea if you've kind of had this spark, and then it's up to you to kind of figure out how to bring that spark out into the world, which is a fun premise.
Maybe let us dive in a little bit deeper, because that book, Yoga for Witches, Yoga Witch Magic, it's wonderful. And you know, your background is in yoga. Isn't that interesting, Sarah? I was studying dance and it didn't flow, and what did I do? I went to a yoga teacher training in India. and I absolutely found my flow. It was I found what magic means to me. So in your short bio, or what you write about on your page, right, is how your work with yoga is very much how you that there is a way how we can use yoga, approach yoga to connect with what you call our special powers and inner magic. And we can take a deep dive in there. Because that's where now really the body and joins the conversation.
Yes.
How, tell us about your approach to yoga and how, tell us about your yoga.
I suppose, I mean, everyone who comes to the yoga mat is kind of bringing their story with them. You know, everyone's coming to yoga, whether it's for the first time or they're coming every day to the mat. They're bringing a story with them of their past and their roots. And so when I came to the yoga mat when I was 7, I was a very anxious, very nervous child. And I think my mum, you know, had no concept of yoga, but she was like, maybe this will help. And it did. Yoga stayed with me. You know, it continues to stay with me. And I suppose I was coming from a background of kind of English folk practices, and I suppose Yoga for Witches was kind of a bit of a love letter, really, to kind of my journey and the kind of the things that shimmered around my practice, which is obviously very personal and kind of not unique, but it was not that I've had any right or desire to kind of redefine yoga. You know, yoga is its own sacred ancient practice as it is, but it was to bring my elements that I was also bringing to the practice that I thought might be nice to kind of share with others as a point of interest and as a kind of an acknowledgement that yoga is, you know, it has changed as it's moved into the West. And again, it's not that we want to change yoga, but I suppose as it's journeyed, it has changed. And so it was finding my magic with my yoga practice and then other elements that had been part of my journey. So it's a sharing of that. And also, I suppose, as well, so the next book was Yin Magic. So Yoga for Witches and Yin Magic kind of sisters, they kind of pair together. And it is that idea that in finding our spirituality, or in finding, again, what feels magic or full of flow for us, we're finding our own path, and it can be challenging. It's not easy to find our specific way of being and the elements that really work for us and support us. So it's part of the journey of kind of finding your way, and it may be you're using different strands, different modalities that really work for you, and the kind of the magic that can happen when they kind of all come together and you kind of find your way. It is ever changing, but when you kind of find that little moment of flow, it's very exciting. So that was the journey of writing those 2 books, I suppose, and what I was trying to achieve as best I could. And at the beginning, I only had a glimpse of that idea, and I think Lucy, being a much more experienced and more successful writer and having her own publishing house, she helped me kind of find it, which is wonderful. It's wonderful to have a mentor to help you kind of see the next step. So that was just totally invaluable. If it hadn't been for Lucy and Womancraft, it probably would have stayed as kind of a bunch of scrappy notes that I wasn't quite sure what to do with. So so I had help on the journey, for sure.
Wow. Let's dive even a little bit deeper. And you said yes, of course, you didn't have to kind of change the whole yoga. Yoga is yoga in itself, right? It's in its ancient methodology, so wonderful. But you brought your own element, as we all, I think in the end, Sarah teaches Sarah yoga, Florina yoga. That's how we should really call it. And you brought your elements, and I think let's talk about those elements. One of those elements we already touched upon, it is the fairy tales, the folklore, the ancient stories. And I'd love to just go a little bit deeper there. Why is it actually? Because not many people engage with those. And we are in a country where there is lots around it. But I'm interested in 2 things, Sarah. One, what is the potency, the power in it? How can it enhance our life? And how do you bring that into your classes? Maybe start with the first one.
So I suppose bringing the myth, for example, of the goddesses. So goddess myth is something I'm very fond of. And that I didn't even really make a conscious decision when I was writing the book. It was just they were going in there, and I hadn't really thought too much about it. It was just like, this is definitely happening. But to me, again, it's that part of this kind of the stories we have created and for ourselves as humans. And when we are connecting to ideas of myth and story, we're connecting to elements of ourselves. So
yes,
it doesn't necessarily mean that you believe there is a sun goddess in the sky or a moon goddess that draws the moon across the night sky in a silver carriage, but it's what they can mean to us, what kind of hope they may offer. Again, that idea of possibility. But also the elements of deities are kind of elements of ourselves. They're elements of us as humans. So it's elements that may inspire us, that may reassure us. That idea that they can foster or nurture ideas of strength, empowerment, claiming qualities that, I don't know, sometimes we embrace, sometimes we don't, especially as women, qualities of speaking up, of being desirous of something, of being lustful or sensuous or furious. Goddesses really embody that. And I think the idea that we can connect to that in whatever, within our life, within our practice, we are embodying elements of these deities if we wish. And some people find that really inspiring and interesting. Some people just find it as like a really a cute story, and that's fun. And we get to decide where we want to go with these stories and how they can speak to us, and they're going to speak to us in different ways at different times, and maybe they help us write our own story, whatever that is, whether it's a journey to something, whether it's looking back on our story and how far we've come. So yeah, the power of myth and story, I think it's always been there in my work. I think I'm delving more deeply into it now, but looking back, the seeds were there in the beginning, and now I'm understanding why those seeds were there, so that I could journey from practices of the East with yoga, and now I'm really journeying very deeply into my own heritage, my own land. So it's taken me a while to journey from there to here. But it's been a great journey.
I'm just taking a little pause from my conversation with Sarah to invite you onto my new free magical mini course. If you have followed me for a while, you know that my own journey has been a journey from body shame and disconnect to joy and into the fullness of my creative power. And over my summer break, I have created a free mini course for you, in which I share with you how the gold nuggets, or I share with you the gold nuggets of inspiration, tools and practices I harvested in that process, and how you can use those tools to meet your very own version of your soft rebellion and your magical witchcraft. So yes, if you would like to be guided onto a journey to move from body shame and disconnection to joy and into the fullness of your creative power, and if you would like to taste the wild and poetic nature of the soft rebellion and align with the momentum of its movement, then this is for you. You can find all the links and details in the show notes. And I'm just so very much looking forward having you on board. Let us journey together, and I'm so excited to hear what you take from my offering, what it does with you and how it changes your experience of your life. Do email me at softrebellion@florinatali.com or tag me on Instagram at florinatali and share with me. So let us dive back or head back to Sarah and witchcraft. That's what you already just said. That I find really magical, and just so I couldn't agree more. I feel, I believe, I know, I've learned that we are story creatures, right? We are story creatures. And yes, these stories, metaphors, they speak to us. Sometimes we can't that's what I feel, I can't quite consciously follow it or grab it, but it speaks to me in a way that it reflects something in me. It's like a mirror. And I wanted to say it helps me, or it helps us to find our own voice. Because it or not is kind of, that's how it feels to me. It uncovers certain qualities or powers which, because we can't in our society, that's the point, right? We don't get them mirrored or reflected elsewhere. They're not on Netflix.
Exactly. So there are things we don't quite know how to voice, or feelings we don't quite know how to embody. So it's, and many of these stories have existed for hundreds of years. So it's hundreds of years of people trying to embody and encapsulate, so they can help in that journey of telling our story and living in a way that is right for us. I was going to say living our truth. I know that's a bit of a cliche term, but I do like it.
No, it's not.
Helps us live our truth.
It's not a cliche, Sarah. It's not romantic. Live our truth, absolutely. And there just came the sentence with me too. These stories are calling out of us something which we, I think sometimes maybe also something which we would feel, or me personally, afraid of. Oh, come on, I can't be so blunt and say that I do. But yes, they call things out of us, which, I mean, let's face it, we all have so much more to bring to this world than we think we have, but
yes, to feel empowered to step into that, it's pretty special. That, yeah, you could definitely call that magic, I would say.
And now I'm thinking how wonderful that's the element you bring to yoga, or that you use this beautiful framework of yoga to bring those stories, because it's so helpful in that moment to actually to move to to connect with that vessel which receives the story. Or how, tell us more about that.
So it can be part of moving into that story as well. So again, things that we maybe consider undesirable in society. So with yin magic, I was very much talking about how to be still, how to be slow, and these are ideas that are not necessarily rewarded or valued in our society today. But it's, how can we come to our practice? How can we come to our day? How can we come to our life and be slow and gentle and unhurried? And how can we come to our practice as that person and embody that? And I spoke to just a friend of mine this morning, and she was talking about in the first book, I think I bring up the wonderful goddess of Akilandeshvari, who is the goddess of never not broken. So her name kind of means scattered pieces, and it's that idea that we are all broken, we are all scattered, and that's okay. You can come to the mat as your stressed, broken, many scattered pieces self, and we can not, a class is not going to magically change all of that, but we can be imperfect and be in that space and still create magic and find our way. And that is all part of that wonderful journey of possibility. We don't need to be perfect to do a thing. We don't need to know everything to walk a step. We can just be as we are, show up as we are, and find our words, our stories as we go, and journey with that. So that's part of the yoga of it, I guess, but it's also just the journey as a whole, because it's taking that what we might learn on the mat, or what we might feel on the mat, and then take it out into the rest of our day.
And on that way, yoga is creative bathing too, right? Roll out the yoga mat and see what movements do I receive today. That's usually my practice.
How is my body feeling today? How am I feeling today? What am I hearing today from myself? What do I want to embody today? So it's all part of that exploration. Again, something that we don't do so often sometimes when we're kind of rushed and busy. We don't get a chance to just kind of listen to the body and be like, right, how do you feel today? How are we feeling today? So it's all part of that listening journey.
And before we go on, I just say that again for all of us, for you, me, all the listeners, because that's so beautiful. You said connect to story means to connect to ourselves and to really connect to that story which our life is ready to write for us, with us, through us.
Absolutely, yeah.
And I mean, what could be a starting point also to actually just go to the library this afternoon and grab a fairy tale book and just see what happens with one, right?
Absolutely, I love that.
So that's a task for all you dear listeners this afternoon.
Please do.
And then
please
tell
do.
us, share with us, with Sarah, with me. You can find us all on Instagram. I will link you. Share what this conversation did with you.
Fantastic. I love that. And, whenever I'm doing research and I find those kind of the stories that we kind of don't recognize, and you think, gosh, this is amazing, and I don't recognize this one at all. Usually it's the slightly stranger, slightly more complex, slightly more confusing ones that don't become, the Disney films and things. And they're the ones that I just adore, because they're the ones where you really find some special ideas and some special magic. So yeah.
But I propose research. The other thing, which I was just curious when I learned more about your initial background with neuroscience, is that still a big part of your writings of work? Because I know that I know I can't quote you anyone, but right, there is research that if we tell things in stories and metaphors, it actually reaches different parts of our brains, more older parts, and was that already something when you studied neuroscience? I'm just out of curiosity how.
It's a funny one, because I think the kind of the path to neuroscience was kind of one I kind of stumbled into, because I was aged 18 to 20 and I didn't know a damn thing about anything, and I wasn't really making any conscious decisions about life. But I was lucky when I went over to Boston in America. I was in a psychology and neuroscience lab that was working with an area that we now call contemplative neuroscience, I think, or contemplative sciences, I think they're calling it, which is meditation, Tai Chi, yoga, the practices of kind of drawing inwards and how that can affect our brain. And I think we understand in the science realm, if we needed reinforcement of this stuff being good, wonderful things that happen to the brain. Yeah, if we needed it. I mean, people have been doing this for centuries and didn't need a scientist to tell them that it's good. But it's fascinating all the same. But yes, the studies that are diving deeper into the benefits of meditation and yoga and Tai Chi and these kind of practices. So during my time there, that kind of happened, which was exciting, and obviously planted a seed in my mind. But it would take quite a long time after that to kind of know what to do with it again. Sometimes I see, teenagers and 20-year-olds now, and they've got such a strong sense of self. Whereas I was just I was still that anxious child, basically. I was in a permanent state of fight or flight, and I barely remember what I was up to and what was going on. But there were just snippets where I was like, oh, this is interesting. So it all added to my journey. But I can't say that I rocked up at Harvard and was like, yeah, I've got this under control. I know what's going on. Let's learn about meditation and neuroscience. I was just not that cool or competent or anything. But again, it's part of the journey, and those words and stories of my path that kind of added to what I'm doing now. So yes. imperfect pieces that came together. So
I like that. I'm just got one thing which I just now look at my list, what other questions were there or themes to go into. One which I'd love to hear, Sarah, how did that, because there are also a lot of, I want to say, bad connotations to it, or the witch is the bad one, the witch and women and the womanhood and witch. There's obviously a whole thing about it. I think what I'm really interested is, what does witch mean to you? And what does the term witch mean in your work? And let's just first start there. What does witch mean for people, else to clarify maybe?
I'm afraid Which, like the word magic, it's the edges are too fuzzy. Like there is no one description of a witch, because it depends who's asking and who's claiming that word. It is a fascinating word. It's a fascinating word in the same way that magic is because it is so impossible to define. We find it absolutely captivating, absolutely fascinating, because it is everything. It is so many stories. It is history, it's myth, it's possibility and joy, it's horror and oppression, and it's all of our fears in society rolled into one terrifying mass. And it's also all the wonderful possibilities of magic and flight and power. So it's a lot. It's a lot. And trying to define which is just not, it can't really be done. But it's interesting as part of the journey to see how it's been defined in certain times. So in the classical world, in ancient Greece and Rome, women were priestesses, they were sorceresses, they brewed love potions, and it was kind of just part of everyday life. It was just something that happened. There were just people who worked with herbs, and it was just, it was not a kind of a case of whether you believed in it or not. It was just something that was. And you might have, the sibyls that would connect you to the deities and all these wonderful workers of magic. But then there's a point where this power started to be feared as mainly women. What could women do with this power? And then that's where you start to see ideas of fear of what a woman could do with power. And then that assumption drawn from fear that if you give a woman power, she's definitely going to get up to no good. That's for sure. So, and so that is, the chunk of the kind of the witch trials, especially in Europe. But now we're moving into a lovely time of, in the 50s, 60s, 70s, when it became possible to once more kind of call yourself a witch. We saw people kind of exploring, how can I play with this word now? And we have the religion of Wicca, which is something that was created here in England, and revivals of folk magic and druidic practices. And so it's a journey. It's a journey of many words, many stories, many myths, many histories, and it's just an absolute treasure trove of emotions and tales.
Yes.
So yeah, the witch, like magic, means many, many things, and it can mean something to you in whatever way you want it to.
It's so interesting. I think in the very beginning, when I saw that book, Yoga for Witches, one part of me was thinking, why did you not call it Yoga for Goddesses?
That was actually
so why not, Sarah?
That was the original title of the book, was Yoga for Goddesses. I kid you not. So well done.
Because that would be kind of, that would be so sweet, Yoga for Goddesses. So, but why did you call it Yoga for, or why did you and the whole, all with Lucy maybe also decide?
There was just that before I submitted it to Lucy. I think there was a moment where I was thinking of goddesses and deities and how they're these beautiful, gowned, golden, sparkling, amazing beings. And then you have this image of the witch, who is much more in the earth, in the ground, much more complicated. And there was just sense that the witch was the kind of the one that got things done, the one that got her hands in the earth.
Yes.
And so there was just a point where I was like, the goddesses are wonderful inspiration, a wonderful story, and they're absolutely glorious. But if you want something done, you go to the witches for that. So it felt like it has to be witches. And I kind of only really lightly skim on kind of how to define a witch, I think, in Yoga for Witches, because at that point I was just like, I don't even know how I could describe a witch. So I kind of skim over it a little bit, and I'm still delving into what a witch is and what a witch can be, which is part of that journey, because I'll never get there. I'll never get to a place where I can tell you in a very succinct sentence what a witch is, and I think
No,
that's
and you don't,
part of it. Yeah,
and you don't have to,
yeah,
right? Again, from just me
yeah,
listening to you, the two things which reflected something in me deeply is when you said it came to that point, right? When women or the witch realized what, or no, when the witch realized that with the power, and what can she do with that power, and I feel that's, for example, right, that's our journeys to, or because the other question was, why is it so important that we do explore and give expression to our inner witch? And I think exactly that's why it is. And right now you called that out of me. Yes, I am meant to find out what are the powers, what powers do I have? And I'm meant for the greater good to bring into the world. And
so that's your stories, your power, your magic, and it's finding that within you and bringing it out into the world. So,
and I loved how you said that's also where fear came in, right? Fear from people who would witness the witch, that woman who just gets it done. And we all know that fear, don't we? I know that fear very well.
Absolutely. And yes, there is something, obviously in our very patriarchal led society, there is something absolutely terrifying about a woman empowered, a woman who knows who she is, or a person who knows who they are. And the possibilities of what they could do. What could a woman freed, a woman empowered do? And to the patriarchal world, that is a terrifying prospect. To the rest of us, it's magic.
Wow. And that's exactly why your work, I think the wonderful thing about Women's Craft Publishing is that all you authors bring your single work to the world, but it's such also a common voice. You all speak through that same channel, and that makes it, and we're just kind of landed in that place, right?
Absolutely. And it's one of Lucy's many skills with Womancraft is we are all part of a bigger movement, and there's differing authors, we have differing viewpoints about things, but we're all facing the same direction on where we're going, which is wonderful. So to be part of the Womancraft movement, the Womancraft family is a special thing indeed.
And this is, that's what I hope with this podcast also to create, right? To just crowd that more into the world.
Absolutely. And you do a gorgeous job of it. There was, I think it was last year, you published one with Judith called Quiet Strength, which I loved. Just loved that one. So it's all part of something obviously much bigger, and and women feeling that you can share your voice, that we can have a conversation, that it has value to put it out there. It's all part of something much bigger to get our stories out there.
And maybe to kind of slowly wrap it up, what I'd love to ask you to share with us, because we came to that place where I now talk about women, we women, it is our responsibility also to come to a knowledge to our powers, and then to want to bring them to the world. And we might, that's what I did over and over again. I meet this bubble of fear, and I know that it's going through that fear which brings me more to the power, but that working with that fear can make one stuck. Maybe it's again the creative bathing, but do you have a wise word for maybe also all the listeners right now who are kind of being held back by that fear? How what would be a wise
I think
word?
just for me, I suppose we can all share our stories, but it's finding the right way to do it for you. So take your time to explore whether you want to share your story in a podcast or in a book, or sing aloud in a group of women around a campfire, or write an article for a magazine, or create an artwork. So there are a myriad ways to do this. So you should never feel that you have to, oh my gosh, I need to write a novel, but I've got all these other 100 things to do. There's a path to do it for all of us, and it's finding that right path and sharing your story in a way that feels right for you. And we are all We live in a wonderful age where we can all share our story in any way we want, but it's finding the way that works for you. So know that it's a possibility, that it's always possible for you to share your story. You can do it, but feel free to do it in a way that works for you, that feels right for you.
I think you hit right onto gold there, Sarah. And I have to add, or exactly, I couldn't agree more. It was literally a couple of months ago where I felt stuck, and with that fear, I said, I need to see a psychotherapist, and oh god, until I noticed, no, everything is okay with me. I couldn't quite see in this moment what is my way of sharing what I wanted to share at that point. I just kind of deviated from what felt authentic to me. So I found this wonderful cyclical mentor, and we just found a way back. But so yes, wonderful. I so sign what you just said.
Because it can be frustrating when you're like, I've got these stories and I can't get them out, and so that is a really frustrating thing. So it can make you feel frustrated. It can make you feel angry, but it's finding the way is the key. So.
Yes, that's the question. What is, and that's a joyful exploration, right? All these media out there. How do I want to bring it into the world? I sense that this is going to call for a part 2, because I feel we wrap up here, and maybe part 2 we start with the kitchen witch reminds us to honor our hunger. That's that you had that as an Instagram, was it a post or reel? And I could have written a whole essay about that one statement. And I feel we'll just need to have a different conversation about that.
But it's great because at the beginning you said, there was this quote on Instagram that I really loved, and I was like, wait, what one? What? And so I've been thinking, I wonder which one. It's that one. Of course it's that one. That was the one that me and Lucy came up with kind of together in Kitchen Witch Companion, which is the one where we came together and created a book of many voices. So that was that kind of, if we were going to define kitchen witch, which is a slightly different thing to witch, but if we just find kitchen witch or any empowered person, I suppose it would be to honor your hunger, whatever it is that you hunger for, to listen and to seek that out, and to seek satiating that hunger. So
wonderful. To honor our hunger, that's how we send all of us off from this episode, and I'd love to continue the conversation right there, because there is lots to talk about hunger. Thank you so much, Sarah, for all your magic.
Thank you so much for inviting me. It's been a real honor.
Thank you, Sarah, for being with us, and thank you, dear listeners, for being with us and me too. By sharing these conversations with you, I'm leaning into my calling, my own soft rebellion. And it is such a blessing to be creating a platform of resources and inspirations to come home to the creative power of our female body. I would love to hear your takeaways and how this conversation was for you. You can always tag me on social media at florina.tali, or you can write to me, softrebellion@florinatali.com. I'd love to hear from you also, who you would like me to be talking to, what topics you would like to be explored. I just really wanted this to be a conversation. And if you know anyone who you think, she could do with some magic and witchcraft, then please forward this episode to them. And if you did or do enjoy these episodes, my podcast, then please do leave a review, give us a follow. You can't imagine how much of a help and support this is to keep my work going and spread the soft rebellion in the world. I'll be with you next week with another solo, and until then, go and be your unique and weird, wonderful self.